ecumenical platform that brings together four main umbrella bodies in Zimbabwe. That includes the Evangelical Fellowship of Zimbabwe for the Evangelicals and Pentecostals. We have got the Zimbabwe Catholic Bishops Conference, that's for the Catholic Church and Catholics. We have got the Zimbabwe Council of Churches that represents what we normally refer to as mainline Protestant churches. Then also we have got UDA CISA, a Union for the Development of Apostolic and Zionist Churches in Zimbabwe, Africa, that also represents Apostolic within our collective of Zimbabwe heads of Christian denominations. So with me are my colleagues, fellow secretaries. We have got on my immediate left, Father Frederick Chiromba, General Secretary for the Zimbabwe Catholic Bishops Conference. Then next to him, we have got our current Executive Secretary for the ZHOCD, who is also the General Secretary of the Zimbabwe Council of Churches, Reverend Dr. Kenneth Mtata. One of our colleagues has been delayed, Reverend Edson Chakai is General Secretary for UDA CISA. So just to give a recap again, ZHOCD is a platform that brings together the four main umbrella bodies on national engagement, on national responses that involves the ecumenical of the church as a collective. We have been active since early 2000, and currently we have been working on processes around national dialogue, national engagement, economic recovery, issues of reconciliation, and also part of ensuring that we've got a constitution that we are also adhering to. You may recall that in 2006, the collective was able to spearhead the process that resulted in a discussion document that was entitled the Zimbabwe We Want Towards the National Vision and Values Discussion document. So our work has continued since 2006 to date, and now I'm just going to hand over to Father Chiromba, who is going to give us a bit more in terms of where we are coming from, where we are now, and then we can then be able to then see the proceedings. Thank you, Father Chiromba.
Thank you, Pastor Makwara, and thank you for coming. The Zimbabwe Heads of Christian Denominations met in Bulawayo this year in the month of May, where they put together a message or a statement they wanted published. But since that time, the heads of Christian denominations have been working on that statement, how to put it across. It is only yesterday that the executive committee of the Zimbabwe Heads of Christian Denominations met here actually in this building to finalize that statement. And what we have been doing this morning is to go to the various political leaders, particularly the two main political parties. First of all, we met the leader of the opposition party, the Movement for Democratic Change, Advocate Chamisa, to present to him a summary of this message, but also leave him a copy of the full message. And after meeting him, we then went to the President's office, where we did the same, presented a summary of this message from the heads of Christian denominations, and also then left the full message for the President to read in his own time. We will be expecting responses, from both parties to this initiative. But for the purposes of this press conference, you'll need to hear the full statement which Reverend Mutato will read.
Our statement is not too long, but we thought it's best we read it in its entirety so that it's not misunderstood. You will get copies after this. So if you cannot get some of the aspects, I think we can engage for clarification. Call for national Sabbath for trust and confidence building, 7 October 2019. We, the leaders of the Zimbabwe Heads of Christian Denominations, made up of the EFZ, UDA CISA, ZCBC, and the ZCC, met at the Africa Synod House on the 7th of October 2019 to consider the currently unfolding national crisis in its totality and to propose that what we believe is a comprehensive but sustainable solution to it. We have prayerfully come to the conclusion that in light of the current political paralysis, deepening mistrust, and dehumanizing economic decline, the nation will need to take a bold decision to address the root causes of our national challenges that have a very long history and will not be fully resolved by one entity. In this light, we are calling the nation to Sabbath on all political contestation for a period of 7 years to allow for the rebuilding of trust and confidence, reset our politics, and chart a shared way forward towards a comprehensive economic recovery path in a non-competitive political environment. This position builds on the founding vision of the 2006 church discussion document, the Zimbabwe we want, as Pastor Makwara has indicated. The position also builds on the proposal from the Zimbabwe Heads of Christian Denominations Episcopal Conference at the large city hall in Bulawayo on the 8th and 9th of May 2019. I now get into the gist of the paper. The idea of the Sabbath is a deep theological theme in the Old and New Testaments of the Bible and in church tradition. It is based on God's command to his people to set aside the seventh day for rest. 7 years were also considered as Sabbath years, as 7 years were also considered Sabbath years. Seven-year Sabbaths, or 49 years, constituted what was called the Jubilee season. In this Jubilee season, land would be left fallow so that it could recover its nutrients. Debts would be forgiven, new relationships would be built, and God would bless his people. Since its independence in 1980, Zimbabwe reaches a Jubilee year in 2029. The nation could use the coming period to usher in a true Jubilee for the nation by removing all political contestation from the land and focus the period on healing past wounds, recover the economy, and build a new political culture of cooperation focused on nation building. The current deteriorating economic crisis, which is characterized by systemic corruption, shortages of fuel, prices going out of control, and collapse of the health sector, needs to be built from the ground with everyone's support. As we are meeting, doctors are on strike, and other workers, such as teachers, are threatening the same, as they find it difficult to make ends meet with their current remunerations. According to the ZimVac figures for 2019, an estimated 7.7 million Zimbabweans are in need of food assistance due to drought. Malnutrition and the interruption of basic services such as health and education may have both immediate and long-term negative impact. When this is combined with high levels of unemployment, stagnant salaries, and the loss of buying power of salaries for those who are still employed, one can only conclude that Zimbabwe needs an urgent and holistic solution in which grassroots, organized society, and political and policy sectors should contribute to and own. The current political paralysis and logjam, characterized by the failure of the ruling party and the main opposition party to find a workable collaborative model, is an issue of great concern. The fact that the two main political parties remain stuck in post-election mode and will soon embark on a new election mode means that Zimbabwe is unlikely to realize any meaningful engagement between these parties towards a shared constitutional alignment agenda. Without a shared approach to national processes, the efforts by one are undermined by the other, while any positive contribution towards the national good by each is read only within a party political perspective. We foresee that whichever political party wins an election, the paralysis will remain. If the opposition parties do not learn, if the current opposing parties do not learn how to collaborate, it is the people who will continue to suffer if as a nation we fail to establish some unity in diversity. Zimbabwe has not yet undergone healing from the various periods of national hate, while recognizing the efforts of the National Peace and Reconciliation Commission, the failure of the nation to fully bring healing and the mutually acceptable closure to the long past, immediate past, and recent past means that the hatred fossilizes and the propensity for revenge grows. Casual references to ethnicity as the organizing principle for political mobilization threatens national stability in ways many may not be aware of. Having looked at all these issues in a holistic fashion, the church leaders have observed that the current environment does not allow for any meaningful political reforms, nor is it conducive for an inclusive economic participation for ordinary citizens. Such an environment of toxic political relations also renders our international re-engagement process futile, which international isolation inhibits investor confidence and slows economic growth. Such a polarized environment weakens respect for national institutions such as the courts, the police, and the security sectors. Once such institutions are viewed as partisan and lacking in independence, it becomes impossible to elicit cooperation among the policy and political actors to drive a national reform process in the best interest of the nation. The church leaders have also realized that since 2000, election periods have been characterized by violence and paralyzing polarization, and have helped to provoke high levels of mistrust. On one hand, the ruling party has blamed the opposition for selective recognition of electoral processes and for celebrating when the results go in their favor, while crying foul when the results go in the favor of the incumbents. On the other hand, the opposition has continued to point to gross human rights violations and the skewed political playing field. Different observers and independent commissions have raised the need for a broad-based and comprehensive national dialogue to find lasting solution to these challenges and mutual accusations. What has not been proposed is the environment conducive enough to allow for such transformative national conversation to bring hope. It is such a solution the church is humbly proposing to the nation. While all the political bickering is continuing, the basic concern for the ordinary citizen across the political divide is to get on with their personal development. In the current context, citizens have grown weary from struggling against the never-ending waves of electoral polarization that undermine their hard work, disrupt community building, and erode progress. The danger is that the more citizens lose confidence in democratic processes, such as elections, the more apathetic they will become, and the less representative political offices will become. We must rescue this situation by providing not yet another piecemeal solutions. What we need is a proper break with the current paralysis and move towards a real renewal and transformation. It is in this light that the church leaders are proposing a national 7-year Sabbath period for the purposes of A, establishing an emergency recovery mechanism to address the dire national situation, especially for the most vulnerable communities. B, rebuilding trust and confidence by healing all hurts of the past. C, developing a shared national reform agenda to deepen our democracy. D, establishing a shared and inclusive national economic vision. The Sabbath proposal entails suspension of the constitutional provision of elections, but such a deficiency will be redressed through a national referendum. The national referendum question would seek to ascertain from all Zimbabweans whether they agree with a proposal for a 7-year suspension of all political contestations for the sake of rebuilding trust and confidence, by healing all hurts of the past and sharing and executing a shared constitutional and political reform agenda, and establishing and implementing a shared national economic vision. The church leaders are not proposing any detailed government structure for the Sabbath season. Such an implementation structure must emerge from a process of consultation of all citizens at different layers of society. The structure will take into consideration the institutional and systemic requirements to achieve the objectives and safeguard the outcomes of the Sabbath. Through this Sabbath call, the church leaders are soliciting for national acceptance of 7-year Sabbath break as a season for trust and confidence building, resetting of national politics, and creating appropriate environment for economic recovery outside party political competition. The assumption is that once the principle receives national acceptance through a referendum, a consultative process to design the operationalization framework of the Sabbath season will be established through a broad-based and comprehensive national dialogue involving all levels of society. Taking into consideration that the Sabbath call is a holistic and long-term process, but also being aware that we are currently faced with a national humanitarian emergency situation, we as the church commit ourselves to upscaling our efforts towards health, education, development, and humanitarian assistance. In the same vein, we are calling upon all political actors, state and non-state actors, to respond to the immediate need for humanitarian assistance and social services to alleviate the suffering of all Zimbabweans. The statement closes with a reading from scripture in Isaiah 43, verse 18 to 19 and verse 25. Do not remember the former things, or consider the things of old. I'm about to do a new thing. Now it springs forth. Do you not perceive it? I will make a way in the wilderness and rivers in the desert. I am he who blots out all transgressions for my own sake, and I will not remember your sins anymore. Thank you.
Amen. I want to thank our Secretary, Reverend Dr. Kevin Tata, for reading through the statement of the Zimbabwe Heads of Christian Denominations on the proposal of a Sabbath season, as we have been able to hear. At this time, we are opening up for any question and interaction so that we can be able to exchange with the table in front of us, and we can see how to conclude. Okay. I'm being reminded that I'll start with you, my brother. As you raise a question, please introduce yourself and the media house you're also representing.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Byron Mtingete from Fight Online Media. I want to pose my question to Reverend Mutata. If I heard you well, you are proposing to maybe to the leaders of different political parties to sustain elections. But I think, in my opinion, the key contestation is around political leadership. One party is saying we won the election, the other is saying we did not win the election. So if the elections are suspended, I think, in my opinion, it remains an unresolved issue. What is your opinion?
Yes, I think my colleagues can also answer that question. But I think what we are proposing is that we are calling for a suspension of political contestation in a broader sense, but specifically referring to elections. What we are asking is that, is it possible for us to focus on the full and holistic process of healing broken relationships? Because this is what we are actually struggling with. Is it possible that we can focus on a development agenda in which politics plays a side role? Could we focus on a national economic recovery agenda which is informed by convergence rather than competitive political environment? Yeah, at face value, this appears like a very radical call, but what we are looking at is that if people are hoping that at one point such a competitive political environment is going to provide solutions to the challenges Zimbabweans are facing, I think we can wait for a very, very long time. So what we are seeking, and I think we will have to test this with many citizens, but we have a sense that many citizens are tired of continuing in this political cycle, and what they want is to see the improvement of their lives, and if we can find an alternative, what we have provided as a church is an alternative narrative. The existing narrative is that of a winners takes all, which emerges from elections. You win an election and you govern by yourself, and you provide the transformation that is required. But we are realizing that without cooperation from other actors, from other political actors, this kind of recovery seems not to be emerging, and hence this call for the Sabbath break.
Yeah, thank you. Perhaps in addition, one can also add that the proposal actually comes from the heads of denominations with the realization that we tend to be focused, on elections all the time. We are either in a pre-election mode or in a post-election mode, where elections are contested. Like now, we may say we are in a post-election mode where that election, as we were saying, where the elections, as we were saying, were contested. And very soon, we are approaching 2023, we'll be in a pre-election mode. It doesn't give enough room, for the nation to develop. And we are saying, well, we need this Sabbath, in order to build national cohesion before we enter into any contestations.
In other words, are you calling for a transitional arrangement where parties come together, the main parties come together, or what? Because the country needs leadership, political leadership. How can you sustain that? What is the exact thing you are calling for?
I think this is mentioned. I think if you look at, there is a very clear position in our paragraph 9, if you are going to look at the document itself, that the reason why we did not want to spell out what could be that Sabbath government structure, what would it look like, the reason why we did not propose that is because this must come from a consultative process. We think that if you start with a structure before citizens have agreed on a principle, what you are simply doing is to parrot what we have always heard, and we have heard many structures being proposed. And we have seen that in many cases when a structure is proposed without fundamental and systemic transformation taking place, structures come and they go and change never happens. This is not the first time we have had structures being put in place. 1987, we had a new structure put in place when we had this unitary code. In 2009, we had a structure put in place when we had the government of national unity. But we never really addressed the systemic challenges that are facing the nation. What the church is proposing is to propose a process, not a structure. Structure must emerge from this process of national conversation, and this is what we are putting as a priority. We think this process is a priority more than the structure, and that's why we are not proposing any structure.
Thank you, Reverend. So it's more of promoting inclusion than trying to have exclusive engagement. My dear, just introduce yourself again in your question.
Okay, my name is Anna Chibamare for newzimbabwe.com. Would we say the church, as the church, you have actually failed to make these two parties, the ruling party and the main opposition, MDC, failed to come to an agreement? Are we saying dialogue issue? I mean, the dialogue issue has failed completely, so that you are thinking of this other process that you want to, you're suggesting that should maybe come in.
Thank you for that question. Father, you can respond to this one.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. You failed to bring the opposing parties together. Well, that's difficult to say. What I can say this time is that we have engaged both sides, the main political parties, and the leaders are actually in favor, of having this dialogue. Only that it hasn't happened until now, but we keep trying. And with this Sabbath arrangement, we hope it will make the dialogue even easier.
So I think if you are measuring in terms of time, this is not, the dialogue has not matured to that level. But what the Sabbath call does is to introduce substance also into the dialogue. So it provides some content, what that dialogue could look like, what could it entail. But what it also does is that it demystifies the assumption that this dialogue should only be between two political contestants, but it must be a dialogue that is multi-structural. It must happen at grassroots, and that's why it needs time. It must be dialogue that happens at organized society, and it must also be dialogue that is happening at policy and political level. So if you say, has it failed, I would say no. But if you ask, has it delayed, I would say yes.
Thank you, Dr. Mtata. You may also want to understand that within any dialogue process, it often reaches a position where we call mutual aid and stalemate. And part of that can help explain maybe the length of time that this has taken. But we believe where we are, we have received enough word from the Lord around the season we are in, and we believe that both and all over, we are all in a heading place that brings us to the convergence. So that's part of why we are saying we have not failed, but sometimes processes take long, and there's always a culminating point, which we believe that's where we are at this program. Thank you, my brother.
At the beginning, someone, I'm not sure who mentioned that this position you are communicating to us was reached at some time in May. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Sure.
And events have obviously, the position has been, I don't know if I can say it's been overtaken by events. Is this your call? How urgent is it? And when do you anticipate to get responses from the leaders that you have given a proposal to? That is Nelson Chamisa and ZANU-PF. How urgent is it? Because you've taken so long from May to communicate now, and when are you saying you expect a response from those two leaders?
I think we can respond to this. I think when if you look at our statement in May, this was mentioned, but it was never fully developed, because it's not. This is one issue that you cannot wake up one morning and propose. We have to take time to deliberate on it and to look at its implication. But how long this is going to take, I think it doesn't depend only on us. At least one thing we have received, I think Father Chiroba can also confirm from our meetings this morning, the leader of the MDC, Advocate Chamisa, promised that he will introduce it today in their executive meeting. So it shows that for him it's something that is urgent. The office of the president indicated that as soon as the president is going to be traveling today, he will be having this communication. So for him also, it's going to be they indicated that this is something that will be of importance for him. Actually, we also got confirmation in the meeting we had this morning that the president mentioned that he wants to meet the church leaders. So we can sense that I think there is urgency on different sectors, and I think we have to build on that. What we are trying to do is to provide a narrative which everyone can locate themselves going forward. Many of the available narratives have an exclusive future. It's a winners takes all. We get rid of you, we go in and we replace you. What we are trying to offer is a narrative that is inclusive, that brings everyone on board. And we think it is attractive enough for everyone to take up. The good thing is that we have not prescribed mechanically how it looks. So it is something that is urgent, that we will start to have representatives from both political parties who will start to flesh out such a process. But I think my colleagues can also make a contribution. So,
thank you. We're almost winding, so I'm going to just allow these two, and then we can be able to wrap it up.
Yeah, I'm Columbus Mavunga with VOA TV. Reverend Tata, you say there was a buy-in from Nelson Chamisa. I wouldn't be surprised. He's not in power. When you deliberated on this, I'm sure at some point you said, okay, how will ZANU-PF buy in when they are in power? And share with the Membadik. How do you think they will be convinced that they can step down and be with everyone?
yeah, I think whenever you are addressing national questions, there is no one who is insignificant to the engagement, because everyone brings certain capital, and I think that you think the opposition is in a weak position so they can embrace everything. I'm not sure if this is the case, but also to assume that the government of the day would not be willing to engage everyone so that we find a lasting solution. I don't think this is the case. We at least, if our reading is correct, there's a growing consensus that we need to find a model that is going to work and that is going to include everyone. People may give it names, but at the moment, I think we are realizing that we are in a paralysis. Things are not moving at the pace they are supposed to move. People are suffering. We can't continue like this. Anyone who is worth their political salt will not want us to continue in this way. And therefore, there is openness that we find this lasting solution to the current situation. So our reading is that there is openness across the political divide, and I think we must ride on this. We are thinking that this solution is not going to be short-term, and that's why we are calling for a long-term solution. And that's why this positive sentiment that we are getting from across the political divide is something that we can build on.
Yeah, where there is a will, there is always a way. Last brother to contribute.
Well, just have two questions.
Again, please.
I would like to hear from you. What is the end result that you would want to see in the political setup? Is it a government of national unity? Because obviously, with the background that we have seen in here, no party is willing to let it go.
Yeah.
So, are you seeing a government of national unity from your side? Number two is, have you engaged any regional diplomats, SADC or at the continental stage, about this proposal from you?
Thank you for those two questions. I can update that in terms of this proposal, the church leadership felt that we need to first of all engage internally to establish consensus, have homegrown solutions, because we believe that the external world can always come at our invitation when we are doing something and we have something solid. So that is the first response I can share in terms of what has happened. But I can assure you that after this statement or this press conference, we are going then to share this message across to our partners, sister bodies in the region, and the continent, and also globally. We will also then be able to then do the political necessary engagement with the SADC, the AU, and also other arms of a similar nature. So that is just to respond to the second question that you have mentioned. In terms of what are we looking at as a GNU, I can say that we are not necessarily looking for a GNU. What you are looking for is we're looking for a working solution that comes from us as a collective. Whether you call it Government of National Unity, whatever name you give it, what is important is the substance. Are we able to say across party, because most of us are not only politically active. Some are active economically wise, socially wise, so you cannot lampoon everyone in a political basket. So that is what you must also remember. And also remember, there are about 4 key outcomes we mentioned in this statement. What we want to see, what is the end result? It's not only about the government, but the end result is a shared vision, an economic shared vision, a vision for the whole country as a collective. We want to be able to ensure that there is healing, harmonious relationship within and across all, and even the current efforts being there. We want to make sure everyone is involved in the local and international engagement. The other components you can find that they are mentioned in that within the position of what is the end result. So some may say you are parroting for one agenda or a party. It is up to you to conclude, but you should be able to trust and follow the process to see what is it that the Lord has given us in this season as we seek to bring the nation together. Brethren, can also comment on those two.
I think this is very important response, Pastor Mapara, because I think it's one thing to look at the end product as a structure, but I think what we are calling the nation to do is to look at the end product as the content. What should the end product do? What should it enable us to do? The end product must enable us to help Zimbabweans reconcile. The end product must enable us to chart a shared national economic agenda in which everyone is going to contribute. This end product must enable us to entrench our constitutional democracy and to give us rest from abrasive and toxic political contestation. And I think if we focus our engagement on content rather than on the structure to deliver this content, I think we will have fallen into a trap. And I think this is what Pastor Makwara is emphasizing, and this is what we are going to be driving. This is what we are going to be campaigning for also among citizens, and hopefully the media is going to contribute in communicating the same message.
Thank you. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, can only be said that we are so grateful that the Lord has allowed us to gather in this manner. And our prayer is that may the Lord remember this nation, including you and I. May the Lord bless us even as we part ways. Thank you. This marks the end of our press conference.